Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go!
It was a rainy day like any other in the city. A young man walked through the crowd, shielded by an umbrella, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. Amidst the rush and the downpour, an inevitable collision occurred, an accidental encounter between two strangers on the path. The impact unbalanced the young man, who ended up falling onto the wet ground. His umbrella flew away, leaving him completely exposed to the storm. For an instant, he lay there, feeling the cold rain on his face. More annoyed than hurt, the young man looked up, trying to understand what had happened. Without wasting time, he got up and ran, seeking any shelter to escape the storm that worsened with each passing second. He ran through the drenched streets. However, as he ascended, a strange feeling enveloped the atmosphere. A shadow stretched across the steps in front of him. He realized he wasn't alone. His steps suddenly halted. The staircase, once a refuge, now seemed too silent and empty. The rain outside was the only sound breaking the quiet. Time seemed to freeze. Suddenly, a light flickered, revealing a figure standing at the top of the stairs, and it wasn't an ordinary person. A man with long hair and reddish eyes stared at him with terrifying intensity. He held what appeared to be the hilt of a sword, ready to act. In the blink of an eye, the stranger was upon him, so close their breaths mingled. Fear completely paralyzed the young man. The proximity was suffocating. Paralyzed by fear, the young man felt tears stream uncontrollably, unable to react to the overwhelming presence of that figure. But amidst the panic, his mind began to process the scene. He noticed that the figure in front of him didn't seem like an ordinary assassin. It was different. He realized the intimidating aura came from a girl. The surprise left him even more confused, not understanding who she could be or what she wanted with him. Instinctively, he took a step back, trying to create some distance to think. The sudden movement caused the girl to also step back, ending up pressed against the wall. The atmosphere of mortal danger was broken by a moment of pure strangeness. The swordswoman glared at him, clearly annoyed. Her previous murderous intent had transformed into pure frustration. The young man bent down to pick up the keys he'd dropped in surprise. The adrenaline began to subside, and his confusion only grew. To his surprise, the girl simply sat on the steps, next to his apartment door, as if nothing had happened. He stood still, watching her in silence. The situation was so bizarre that he didn't know what to say or do. Gradually, fear gave way to curiosity. He began to notice the details of that strange figure: her posture, the sword, her clothes, and even her sandals. He realized she looked more like a very dedicated cosplayer than an actual threat. Without realizing it, he ended up thinking aloud, commenting on how dedicated she seemed. The girl heard him and reacted instantly. Realizing what he'd done, the young man became utterly embarrassed and quickly turned to the door, trying to escape the awkward situation. All flustered, he tried to fit the key into the lock, just wanting to get home and forget everything that had happened. But looking back, he saw the girl recoiling, completely offended by his comment. The situation only grew stranger and stranger. Upon entering his home, the young man couldn't get the girl out of his head. He could only think about how strange she was. Before closing the door, he took one last peek into the hallway. To his surprise, the girl was still there, standing in the same spot, looking completely lost. Deciding to ignore the situation, he finally went inside. He took off his shoes, relieved to be safe. The first thing to do was get rid of the clothes soaked by the rain and the chaotic day he'd had. After a quick shower to relax, he felt a bit more like himself, and to complete the process, nothing beats a cold drink. He went straight to the fridge, but before he could rest, he remembered he had another responsibility. He got the cat food from the cupboard. His feline companion also needed attention. With his task completed, now it was truly time for his well-deserved rest. He opened the soda can. The young man drank it all in one gulp, feeling the cold drink wash away all the day's stress. In that moment, with that simple pleasure, he completely forgot about the bizarre encounters and the danger outside. Meanwhile, his cat ate happily, rubbing against his leg in gratitude. With everything settled, the young man sat down to watch the rain through the window, finally at peace. The storm raged on outside, but inside his apartment, the world seemed calm and normal once more. But the calm didn't last. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from outside, shattering the rainy night's silence and grabbing his attention. The sound came directly from his apartment door. Instinctively, he grabbed his umbrella, preparing to check what was happening. With his heart pounding, the young man approached the door. He was sure someone was out there, but when he looked through the peephole, he saw absolutely nothing. The hallway was completely empty. That made no sense at all. The noise had been real. He wasn't imagining things. Despite his apprehension, curiosity won out. He opened the door just a crack, expecting anything, and on the other side, he found a girl. She didn't seem to be from around here and stared at him with unsettling intensity as she entered. Completely caught off guard, the young man didn't know how to react to that unexpected visit in the middle of the storm. He tried to be helpful, suggesting she call her family or find a security guard since she was completely drenched from the rain. But her reaction wasn't what he expected. The girl seemed not to understand a single word he was saying. Instead of answering, she simply asked what place this was, leaving the young man even more confused. The girl eyed him suspiciously, as if he were the stranger in this story, not her. The two stared at each other in awkward silence. The situation was so bizarre he didn't even know where to begin explaining. Trying to break the ice, he introduced himself, saying she could call him Lei Feng. Inside, the young man was in complete panic. Trying to be a good host, the young man offered her what looked like a cane, but the girl's response was even stranger. She introduced herself as a disciple and even asked if he was ill. Her seriousness was so convincing that for a moment, the young man almost believed her story. The girl seemed genuinely confused by the world around her. But then it clicked. He finally understood she wasn't a threat, but rather a young girl with 8th grade syndrome, fully immersed in her role as a warrior from another world. And to prove his point, the girl took a combat stance, as if ready for an epic battle right there in his living room. The young man was completely speechless. The situation was so bizarre he didn't even know how to react. Seeing that arguing wouldn't get him anywhere, he simply invited her to come in properly, saying it was cold outside. Just then, his phone rang. It was his uncle. The young man, who identified himself as Xu, tried to stay calm on the call while the mysterious girl watched everything from the doorway. As Xu spoke on the phone, the girl remained standing at the entrance, completely out of place in that modern and unfamiliar environment. After the call, he knew he needed to find a place for her to spend the night, but his room wasn't exactly in the best condition. He tried to communicate with her from across the room, but the distance between them only heightened the strange atmosphere of the situation. Xu then led her to his computer, attempting to show her where they were, or perhaps explain what this world was. The first thing the girl saw on the screen was a job advertisement, something that probably made no sense at all to a disciple from another reality. The advertisement was loud and persistent, showing a very mundane side of this new world. Suddenly, Xu's expression changed completely. The conversation with his uncle on the phone, which he had resumed, took an unexpected and frightening turn. Panicked by what he had just heard, Xu grabbed the girl by the shoulders. The tranquility of his apartment had just been shattered. The girl's reaction to Xu's panic was immediate and violent. Without understanding what was happening, she drew her sword and in an act of pure instinct, destroyed the source of the noise and images that frightened her, the television. Suddenly, the sound from Xu's device left her paralyzed. A familiar and terrifying voice called his name, confirming that the danger she sensed wasn't just imagination. On the other end of the line, Xu heard the same voice. He could barely believe what was happening and was left speechless. The girl then turned to Xu, her eyes filled with fury. To her, that small object in his hand was the source of all evil, a weapon that needed to be silenced at all costs. As tension exploded inside the apartment, outside, the storm continued to rage over the city. The scene was one of complete chaos, indifferent to the drama unfolding in a small apartment in the middle of the metropolis. The scene was surreal. A girl in ancient attire, a destroyed television, and a terrified young man on the phone. The modern and ancient worlds had collided disastrously. Xu tried to process the speed of events. 1 minute everything was fine, the next, his home was in chaos and his life in danger. He tried to force a smile, wanting to calm the girl and at the same time understand who was on the other end of the line and how they knew where he was. But the girl didn't care about his explanations. Her eyes were fixed on the cell phone, the portal from which the threatening voice had emerged. A shiver ran down her spine. She recognized that threat, and its presence in that device meant there was nowhere to run. Xu's mind, on the other hand, short-circuited. He tried to find a logical explanation for the bizarre situation. The young man wondered if she was from an acrobat troupe, but his biggest fear was far more practical. How would she pay for the TV she just destroyed? Desperate, Xu tried to argue, reminding her that he was a good person and just wanted to help, like when he offered her an umbrella earlier. But his pleas didn't work. To the girl, his intentions didn't matter in the face of the imminent danger she felt coming from that strange technology. The strange girl stared at the cell phone as if it were a weapon. She confirmed that the threat from that object was as real as the blade in her hands. Xu tried a new approach. With a nervous smile, he put away his phone and asked her name, hoping to calm things down. The gesture seemed to work, and she slowly put away her sword. The girl formally introduced herself as Zhang He, a disciple of the Salt Gang. Her posture was still defensive, but at least the immediate threat had passed. Xu found the gang's name rather peculiar and asked where it was located. Zhang He was indignant that he had never heard of such a famous group. Realizing the enormous cultural gap between them, Xu decided he needed to be more direct and helpful to resolve the bizarre situation. Zhang He hesitated for a moment. She was completely lost in that strange place, and his offer of help seemed to be her only option. The young man insisted, saying she could ask anything she wanted. He reiterated that he was a good person and just wanted to help her. His words finally reached her. With a melancholic tone, Zhang He confessed that the only thing she wished for was to return home, to the Salt Gang. Trying to be helpful, Xu asked if she knew the city of Jiangcheng, but the name meant nothing to the girl, leaving her even more confused. It finally dawned on Xu. Frustrated, he wondered aloud if he would have to go as far as asking who the emperor was for her to understand. The mention of His Majesty left her in shock. To her, the answer was obvious, and his question made no sense at all. That was enough for Xu to understand the scope of the problem. He stepped back a bit, processing the unbelievable information. Now, he had a terrible suspicion. With a serious face, Xu approached her to ask the question that could confirm everything. He asked what year it was. Zhang He's answer, spoken with complete naturalness, would be proof that she wasn't from this world or this era. To try and explain things, Xu had an idea. Use technology to his advantage. He took out his phone to show her a popular game, a reference anyone from his time would understand. He tried to explain the game's concept, but the task proved much more difficult than he expected. His explanation was useless. Jong-hoo remained completely lost, not understanding what he was trying to show with that strange device. The cultural barrier between them was gigantic. To her, modern technology was like an incomprehensible type of sorcery. Suddenly, her expression changed. Jong-hoo seemed to recognize one of the characters on the screen and, with curiosity, asked if Xu knew him. Xu, on the other hand, was in trouble. He was in the middle of an online match, and, by the look on his face, his character was about to be eliminated. But Jong-hoo wasn't joking. Her gaze became serious and focused on the screen, as if she had identified a real threat in the game. The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. For Xu, it was lunch. For Jong-hoo, it was the sound of an approaching enemy. She didn't hesitate to draw her sword. Xu panicked. He gestured desperately, trying to explain that there was no danger and that she shouldn't attack the delivery person. He clarified that it was just the food delivery he had ordered, an ordinary person, not an assassin or an enemy servant. The word delivery meant nothing to her. The girl remained suspicious, not understanding how someone could simply bring food to their door. Without time for more explanations, Xu used the food bag itself to push her face out of the way and grab his order. With the food finally in hand, he said her protection was no longer needed. The big threat was just lunch arriving. Jong-hoo watched him walk away, still processing how different this world was. What was routine for him was an imminent danger for her. Xu sat down to eat, but the tension in the air was palpable. He realized that living with someone from another era would be much more complicated than he imagined. Jong-hoo tried to explain, saying she had only been there a short while and was still adjusting. But Xu, exhausted, just wanted a minute of peace to finally eat his lunch. The image of the girl in combat mode, ready to eliminate any threat, was still fresh in his mind. It was hard to relax near someone who saw danger in everything. He decided to ignore the tension for a moment and focus on what truly mattered. His burger. After all, he was starving after all that commotion with the delivery guy. The first bite was the most important for forgetting the stress. But before he could eat, Jong-hee appeared out of nowhere, right in front of him. She still hadn't gotten an answer to her questions and wasn't going to leave him alone. The girl leaned over the chair, analyzing the food with a curiosity that bordered on intimidation. Xu's peaceful lunch was officially ruined, her eyes fixed on another part of the snack. To her, it was a completely alien object, and she needed to understand what it was. The food seemed to glow, almost like a mystical treasure. Jong-hoo had never seen anything like it in her entire life. A slight embarrassment washed over her, but curiosity was stronger. That smell, that appearance. It was something she felt she needed to experience. Her patience began to wear thin. She didn't understand why he was eating those strange things instead of explaining the situation. Seeing he wouldn't get any peace, Xu tried a new tactic. He offered her a drink, hoping it would distract her for a while. The offer, however, had the opposite effect. Jong-hee interpreted the gesture as an insult, accusing him of belittling her from the start. The situation quickly escalated. Desperate, Xu tried to explain the basics, saying the food's name. He placed a soda can on the table, trying to show there was no threat there. Amidst the tension, the soda can fell and spilled on the floor. The sound broke the moment, and they both just stared at the mess, unsure what to say. The silence was broken by Xu, who tried to explain the drink wasn't poison, just a soda. But Jong-hee remained there, still, silently processing everything. The young man panicked completely, stammering that it was all a huge misunderstanding. The situation had spiraled entirely out of his control, and he didn't know how to explain himself. In his mind, he relived the moment of danger, with the girl ready to deliver the final blow. The threat was real and immediate, and any mistake could be his last. Her gaze left no doubt. There was no room for error. Every one of his movements was being judged with deadly intensity. With his heart in his throat, he decided to try a different approach. He grabbed another soda can, hoping a demonstration would solve the problem. To prove the drink was safe, he took a sip in front of her. Jong-ho continued watching, attentive and suspicious of his every move. That's when it clicked for him. A crucial detail he had completely forgotten amidst all that confusion. He tried to argue, asking her to stop drawing her sword for every little thing. After all, if he were a bad person, he wouldn't have even let her into his house. The argument seemed to work, leaving Jong-hee unsure how to react. For the first time, she seemed a bit lost by his logic. The young man took the chance to change the subject, explaining that all that violence was scaring his cat, Winter Melon. And indeed, the poor cat looked like it had seen a ghost. It was completely paralyzed on the floor, but the attempt to appeal to the animal's cuteness didn't work. Jong-hee's hand was already back on her sword hilt, ready for action. Seeing that the conversation was going nowhere, the young man began to think about his options. He concluded there were only 3 ways to deal with that violent girl. The first option was the cruelest. Simply trick her into leaving the house and abandoning her. He imagined that in a few days she'd end up on the news, arrested, or worse. The second option was to call the police, but he quickly dismissed the idea, imagining the ridiculous scene of trying to explain he had a girl from a 1200-year-old dynasty in his house. Besides, he thought about what would happen to her. The police would treat her like a lost and scared girl, without understanding the situation's complexity. The risk of everything going wrong was too great. He imagined the chaos it would be. If the police showed up to deal with Jong-ho, the situation would turn into a real bloodbath. And then he arrived at the third option. Simply observe the situation for now. After all, he had a girl from an ancient era, a legendary figure right in front of him. The idea was absurd and overwhelmed him. He had a girl from 1200 years ago with a sword inside his house. How could he just let her go, even if she was dangerous and drew her weapon for any reason? While the young man freaked out internally, Jong-ho, completely oblivious to the drama, began to investigate the modern world. Her first victim was an innocent soda can, which she poked with curiosity using her sword scabbard. And that's when it clicked for the young man. He realized he was living a scene only seen in fantasy stories. Letting this opportunity pass would be a lifelong regret. He had to try. Determined to make things work, the first step was to try a peaceful approach. He offered some food to Jong-hee, who stared at him with complete distrust. The appearance of that modern food was something she clearly had never seen before in her entire life. But the smell seemed good. So good that she couldn't hide her desire to taste it, even while trying to maintain her warrior's composure. Seeing her hesitation, the young man realized he needed to do more. He thought maybe he should take the first bite, just to prove the food wasn't poisoned. And that's exactly what he did. As he ate calmly, Jong-hee approached, wanting to know what that thing was. The simple sight of the young man eating was enough. Jong-hee's eyes lit up, and her desire to try it finally overcame her suspicion. He took another bite, and she followed his every move with her gaze. It seemed that, finally, the food would be the bridge to break the ice between them. She didn't just taste the food, she devoured everything in seconds, leaving the young protagonist completely stunned. Before he could offer more, the meal was already gone. Moments earlier, he had offered her a bowl, completely unaware of the overwhelming hunger he was about to witness. Jong-ho, meanwhile, still eyed him with suspicion. As he ate, the girl stared at him with an absurd intensity. Her expression was a mix of suspicion, curiosity, and a hint of indignation. The young man finally broke the silence. He asked her to sit down so they could talk, admitting that her presence, standing and armed, was terrifying him. After a moment of hesitation, Jong-ho moved towards the sofa. The scene was so surreal that the young man thought he should take a picture to capture that rare moment. He watched with an air of satisfaction as she finally sat down. It was a small step, but it felt like a big victory to calm things down. With a serious expression, Jong-ho turned to him. She was ready to speak, but what she would say was still a complete mystery. She remembered that the first thing he did was offer an umbrella. Even without understanding anything about that world, she recognized the object and the kind gesture. But that memory was soon overshadowed by the thought of the TV she herself had broken upon arrival. Her first impression of that place had been one of pure destruction. Across the room, even the cat Winter Melon sensed the situation was strange. From the feline's perspective, this new person was, at the very least, peculiar. Jong-ho's thoughts returned to the exotic foods and drinks he consumed. Every detail of that place put her on high alert. The young man's explanation, however, left her in shock. Whatever he said, it was something she could never have imagined. Seeing her reaction, he tried to calm her, asking her not to be scared by what he was about to tell her. The tension in the air was almost palpable, but his biggest concern was the weapon. He pleaded for her to put it down first, afraid she might get agitated. Her hands, however, only tightened their grip on the hilt. After the young man's initial explanation, Jong-ho huddled on the sofa. The only thing she could express was a desperate desire to go home without even knowing where she was. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. The young man watched in silence, knowing that the most difficult part of the conversation was still to come. He stared at her, preparing to reveal the full truth, no matter how painful it might be. Jang-ho sensed the seriousness in his tone and looked back at him, hoping for an answer that made some sense. The girl watched him with a mix of fear and confusion, having no idea of the bombshell that was about to drop. He then began to explain that the problem wasn't physical distance, but rather distance in time. The young man revealed that she was more than 200 years removed from her own time. She didn't understand what that meant, so he was more direct. He explained that this place was the world 1,200 years after her era, citing names of historical figures who, to her, were real people. The truth hit her like a lightning bolt. Everyone she knew, her emperor, her friends, her family, all had been dead for over 1,000 years. Unable to process the information, Jong-ho's first reaction was denial. She jumped up, accusing him of being a liar. The young man, however, seemed to have expected this. He remained calm, despite the accusation. He tried to find the right words to make her understand, even with the tension in the air. The young man appealed to her logic, asking her to remember what she saw outside. This world was proof that everything she knew had become history. For a moment, he reflected on the situation. He concluded that she wasn't violent, she was just scared. And deep down, he knew he'd react much worse if he were in her shoes. Despite the young man's pleas, Jong-ho's denial was stronger. She refused to believe a word, ready to leave. He tried to stop her, desperate to make her understand. Calmly, he explained that this world had its own laws and that she needed to understand them to stay safe. Walking around with a weapon like that was dangerous. The young man insisted on the importance of following the local rules. Faced with his strange concern, Jong-ho questioned him directly. She couldn't understand why a complete stranger was trying so hard to help her. His answer, however, was nothing like what she expected. In the middle of that tense conversation, the young man simply turned to his cat. He picked up the feline and presented it as the reason for everything. Apparently, the help was because of the fat cat. The explanation left Jong-ho completely speechless and visibly annoyed. That man's logic made no sense to the warrior from another time, but for a moment, she remembered how she met him. Back in the present, the situation became even more bizarre when the young man, holding the animal, commented on how much fur the cat was shedding. She remembered he didn't seem like a threat. He was just an ordinary guy heading home who found her lost and alone. As it started to get dark, he even offered his umbrella to protect her, a simple gesture of kindness. Meanwhile, back in the apartment, the young man continued his awkward attempt to break the ice. He used the cat as an emotional shield, trying to ease the tension in a way only he seemed to understand. He tried to explain the philosophy of this world. Here, people were peace lovers, and the first rule was not to hurt anyone. He was proof of that, a simple guy who just wanted to live peacefully. He imagined the worst possible scenario, a tragic, irreversible end. If he failed to explain the rules of this world, that's what could happen to any of them. It wasn't an option. Therefore, he tried to convey the seriousness of the situation. Acting on impulse in this place, without understanding the consequences, was like being already dead. He needed her to grasp the danger, but he quickly changed his tone, trying to emphasize that they were peace lovers, a somewhat desperate attempt to relieve the tension he himself had created. The young man then began to dictate the rules for her survival there. The first and most important of all, it was strictly forbidden to harm other people. Zhang He listened to the first rule without showing any reaction. The laws of this modern world seemed to make no sense to the warrior. He added that she also couldn't go around breaking things. With each new rule, Zhang He's patience seemed to dwindle a little more. The young man then gave her a choice: accept his help or leave right now. But he warned her that, outside, the public officials were dangerous and she shouldn't cause trouble. Zhang He looked at the rain outside, in silence. The truth was harsh. She had nowhere to go. Leaving that apartment meant getting lost in a world she didn't understand. The raindrops dripping from her clothes onto the floor were the only proof that she truly came from another place, another time. Seeing she wasn't going anywhere, the young man offered a truce. He said if she lowered her weapon, he would order food for her using that strange device. And that's when he proved his point. When the delivery person appeared at the door, Zhang He's instinctive reaction was to attack, but the young man stopped her, showing that this was a world of conveniences, not threats. She remained silent, processing the situation. That simple act of ordering food was as strange to her as her clothes were to him. The cultural shock was immense. With the situation a bit calmer, the young man tried a new approach. Food. He asked what she usually ate, realizing that perhaps the local foods would also be strange to her. Without an answer, he decided on his own. He would order something simple and traditional, like rice and bread, hoping it would be something she at least recognized. While they waited, he suggested she take a shower to dry off. But then, he realized another problem. Would she know how to use a modern bathroom? Following up on his idea, the young man voiced his concern aloud. He questioned if Zhang He even knew how to use a modern bathroom or dry her clothes. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. The girl's confused expression was the only answer he needed. It was clear she had no idea what he was talking about. So, the tour of the modern world began with the most basic room in the house. He took her to the bathroom to show how things worked, but Zhang He's reaction upon seeing the toilet was pure shock. The young man sighed, realizing it would be a long night. Explaining centuries of technology to someone from the past was more exhausting than he'd imagined. He tried to calm her, explaining that not everything in this world was a threat. He needed her to understand he had no intention of harming her. Zhang He listened in silence, still suspicious, but perhaps a little less hostile. She seemed to be starting to understand that he was, in fact, trying to help. The next lesson was about the shower. Patiently, he demonstrated how the hot and cold water controls worked, a completely new concept for her. Fascinated, Zhang He approached to examine the object. The young man encouraged her to try it, watching her marvel at the conveniences of modern life. The lesson continued with the toilet flush. A simple press of a button that made the water swirl was enough to make the girl's eyes widen. With homework finished, the young man finally had a moment to breathe. He collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted from having to act as a guide for a time traveler. But the rest was short-lived. Soon, another problem arose in his mind. Clothes. Jiang Hu couldn't keep wearing those ancient garments forever. He went to his closet to find something she could wear, but he ran into a problem. His t-shirts, let's just say, weren't very appropriate for the situation. He needed to find a solution, and fast. Bringing a towel, he knocked and entered the bathroom. He found Jiang He at the sink, still impressed by the simplicity of running water coming from the faucet. It was then that he had to admit his little problem. Awkwardly, the young man explained that he didn't have any women's clothes at home, but promised he would buy something for her the next day. To make her feel safe, the young man decided to teach her one more thing: how to lock the door. He explained the mechanism, assuring her she'd have complete privacy for her bath. With that said, he left and closed the door, leaving her by herself. But as soon as he was outside, the young man panicked. It finally hit him, and he had to brace himself to avoid a breakdown, realizing the unbelievable situation he'd gotten himself into. Completely exhausted by the tension, he collapsed onto the couch. The energy to deal with all of it had simply run out. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Jiang He was discovering the wonders of a modern bath. The foam and hot water were absolutely fascinating novelties to her. She had never seen anything like it, and with a child's curiosity, she even tried to taste some of the foam. The taste, obviously, wasn't the best. Now composed in the living room, the young man tried to process reality. An ancient girl? A warrior? He wondered if it wasn't all just a very bizarre dream. It was then that he looked at her sword, the only object that could prove that story was real. Carefully, he began to unsheath the blade. There was no doubt. The sword was real, sharp, and dangerous. The girl in his bathroom wasn't an actress, but a true warrior from another time. At that moment, the bathroom door opened. Jiang He appeared, now wearing one of his t-shirts, and looked for him. She found him sitting at the table, focused on writing something on paper. Curious, Jiang He approached to see what he was doing. The girl leaned over his shoulder, trying to understand the strange symbols he was drawing, but she had no idea what he was writing. To her, it was just a bunch of meaningless scribbles. With the list ready, the young man handed it to Jiang He. He explained, a bit awkwardly, that these were the most urgent problems they needed to solve for her to stay there. Jiang He took the paper and analyzed it with a serious expression. She tried to decipher the strange symbols, while the young man watched her from the couch, awaiting her reaction. The list contained basic survival items for the modern world: towels, clothes, shoes, cosmetics, and of course food. Simple things for him, but a universe of novelties for her. As she read, she looked at the t-shirt she was wearing and commented that those clothes were also very strange. The fabric and shape were unlike anything she had ever worn before. The comment caught the young man by surprise, leaving him a bit embarrassed, but he couldn't help but smile. Her honesty and complete unfamiliarity with his world were, in a way, captivating. He recomposed himself, trying to keep the conversation focused on practical matters and avoiding anything that could be misinterpreted. The situation was already delicate enough. Then, he pointed to a pair of slippers on the floor, suggesting she swap her old straw sandals for something more suitable for staying indoors. Jiang He looked down at her own feet. The worn sandals were a constant reminder of her journey and the world she had left behind. She walked towards the shoe rack to make the switch. The young man watched her, finding the scene incredibly cute, despite all the strangeness. Suddenly, the doorbell echoed through the house, startling Jiang He. The food delivery he had ordered finally arrived. Seeing her fright, he quickly reassured her. He explained it was just the delivery person and there was no reason to be scared. He thought about how skittish and distrustful she was. In his mind, he compared her to a stray cat, always alert and ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. While the young man picked up the food at the door, Jong-he peeked from a safe distance, still hidden and uncertain about what was happening. Sitting at the table, Jong-he was still analyzing the situation. She remembered a saying her old second-in-command used to repeat, trying to decipher the young man's true intentions. With an almost childlike suspicion, she explained the saying, "If someone does something for you without asking for anything in return, that person is probably a thief." Her logic left the young man completely speechless, but then, with a genuine smile, she broke her own distrust. She admitted that, despite the saying, she felt he was a good person. The hostility in her gaze finally began to fade, giving way to an expression of relief. With the tension finally broken, a comfortable silence settled between the two as night advanced outside, and apparently, her hunger was immense. In a matter of moments, Jong-he devoured all the food, leaving absolutely nothing behind. The young man observed her, noticing how much more relaxed she seemed after eating. He began to think about what the next step would be to deal with the situation. He decided it was time to explain the rules. He started by saying that regarding the world outside, things were a bit more complicated for her. Jong-he listened attentively, nodding her head. She seemed willing to understand the rules of this new and strange world. He explained that the world was now peaceful, but precisely because of that, it was dangerous for her. If she went out acting like a warrior, she'd be seen as a threat and end up captured. He estimated he could resolve the situation in 7 days. To illustrate his point, the young man stood up and walked towards one of the strange objects in the room, while Jong-he watched him. Curious, he pointed at the TV, explaining that she had no idea what the things there were. He said that object, for example, was just a device that emitted sounds. Next, he picked up his cell phone to show her another modern marvel. He showed that, unlike her world, here there were countless things made just for leisure and relaxation, like the music coming from the small device. He gestured to the entire room, presenting a world of conveniences and entertainment, a place where she didn't need to fight and made it clear she could ask anything. Jong, who remained silent, trying to process the avalanche of information. The idea of a world focused on leisure and convenience was something she could barely comprehend. Seeing her confusion, the young protagonist continued his explanation, trying to make everything as simple as possible so she would feel safe. However, his tone changed, becoming more serious. There was a crucial point she needed to understand for her own survival. He described his world as a peaceful and safe place where everyone lived in harmony, a reality that, for a warrior like her, sounded like an impossible fantasy. The mere mention of a world without constant conflict put Jong-he on alert. The peace he described was completely foreign to her. The young man then began to explain the system that maintained this order, a rigid system that didn't forgive anyone who tried to stay outside of it. He made it clear that if someone committed a crime, they would be easily tracked and captured by the authorities. There was no way to hide. To prove his point, the young man went to a drawer and took out an object that was the foundation of this entire social structure. He showed her an identification card, explaining that every citizen received one at birth. That's how the police maintained control and order on the streets. And the warning was clear: anyone without this document would be immediately detained for a full investigation. In this scenario, all of Jong-he's secrets would be exposed. The young man emphasized that the law was absolute and the officers extremely efficient. Trying to fight the system was useless. With this, he wanted her to understand a harsh truth. Her sword and combat skills meant nothing here. To survive, she needed to follow his rules. Jong-he finally put the pieces together. With frightened innocence, she asked if that meant she was a refugee. The word hit her hard. The true weight of her situation crashed down on her. She was alone, without an identity, in a world that didn't recognize her. The young man confirmed her greatest fear. He said that in this world, the position she was in was, in fact, extremely dangerous. It finally clicked. After hearing how dangerous her situation was, Jong-he froze, processing the harsh reality of being a complete outsider in this new world. Instinctively, she took a step back. Distrust was her only defense now. Sitting, she felt small and lost. The girl questioned how she could trust him, a stranger who was her only fragile connection to this place. The young man was direct. He said if she didn't want to believe, she could just forget everything. He couldn't force her to accept his help. A heavy silence filled the room. He waited for a decision, while Jong-hee pondered her very few options. The clock's ticking was the only sound, marking the passage of time that seemed to have stopped. Her decision would define everything. The young man waited patiently, knowing that all the pressure was on her. But instead of continuing the serious conversation, the young man took her sword and, with a smile, set the first rule. No drawing weapons around here. The sudden change in tone caught her off guard. Jong-hee was completely confused by his attitude. It wasn't what she expected. Then, coming from a world with different customs, she asked a question that completely disarmed the young man. She wanted to know where his wife was. The question left the young man completely flustered. He clearly wasn't prepared for that kind of questioning. Awkwardly, he admitted he'd been single for over 20 years, a confession that visibly embarrassed him. His answer seemed to shock Jong-hee even more. Apparently, in her world, the young man's situation was quite unusual. The young man's confession left Jong-hee in shock. The idea of someone his age not being married yet was completely foreign to her, almost unbelievable. An awkward silence filled the air. Jong-hee couldn't help herself and asked aloud if he really wasn't married, confirming her complete perplexity with the situation. The young man was visibly embarrassed by her direct question. He didn't know where to look, caught off guard by the cultural difference that simple question revealed. The situation was stranger than he imagined. To break the heavy atmosphere, the young man decided to take the initiative and called her to follow him, changing the focus of the conversation. He went ahead, and Jong-hee, still suspicious but with few other options, decided to follow him through the house. The young man entered a room, seemingly searching for something, while she just watched from the doorway, not understanding what he intended to do. Uncertainty consumed Jong-hee. His every move was a mystery, and she couldn't relax in that unfamiliar place. He then returned carrying a mattress and bedding. The young man explained she could use them for now and they'd talk more tomorrow, assuring her everything was clean. As he prepared a place for her to sleep, he told her to rest, acknowledging that she must be very confused by everything. He himself seemed to reflect on the strangeness of the situation. In just a few hours, his routine had been turned upside down by the arrival of that mysterious girl. After tidying the room, he led her to the door, showing her where she could safely spend the night. Before saying goodbye, he finally introduced himself, stating his name was Xu Qing, a small gesture to try and build some trust between them. As soon as the door closed, Jong-hee was left alone in the room, lost amidst a whirlwind of thoughts and uncertainties about her future. The sound of the door closing marked the end of that chaotic day, leaving her isolated in a world she was just beginning to understand. Alone in the room, Jong-hee clutched her sword. It was the only familiar thing left to her in that completely strange world, her sole connection to the life she had lost. The firmness with which she held the weapon was a reflection of her own uncertainty and fear. Amidst boxes and the gloom, the girl felt the overwhelming weight of loneliness. Every second in that unknown place was proof that she was completely lost. Meanwhile, in another room of the same building, the night was also proving long for Xu Qing. The young man tried to sleep, but slumber simply wouldn't come. The day's events were far too absurd to ignore. His mind replayed every detail, trying to find some logic in the chaos that had suddenly settled into his life. Restless, he turned in bed, but the questions continued to echo in his head. He reached an inevitable conclusion. None of it seemed real. The entire situation was a complete delusion. He remembered that even before all this, his day had already been a disaster, with a job interview that led nowhere. He had spent the entire day looking for a job, only to be caught in a storm on his way back home. And it was at that moment of pure bad luck that fate decided to complicate things even further. The result was having taken in a girl who drew a sword for any reason and claimed to have come from an ancient era. The reality of the situation was so bizarre he could barely process it. It was simply too much for one person to handle. Exhausted from so much thinking, weariness finally began to outweigh the confusion. He made a decision. For now, he would just sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, and he needed to be rested to face them. After an absurdly long and confusing night, exhaustion finally overcame Xu Qing. But morning arrived, and with it, the harsh reality he had tried so hard to forget while sleeping. His first instinct, like any other day, was to grab his phone from the nightstand. It was already past 10 o'clock. He had slept much longer than usual, and that's when it clicked. Memories of the previous night came rushing back. It hadn't been a dream. The girl? She was real. With a jump, Xu Qing got out of bed to confirm his worst suspicions. With his heart pounding, he peeked out of the room, hoping his living room would be empty. But she was there, completely calm, as if there was nothing strange about the situation. Zhang He was sitting on his couch, a weapon beside her, proving that the chaos in his life was here to stay. He called out to her, still unable to believe this was actually happening. Trying to hide his panic, Xu Qing left the room with a forced smile, pretending everything was under control. He cleared his throat, trying to buy time to think about what to do next. In the end, he acted like a normal host, waving and asking if she was hungry. But behind the forced smile, his desperation was evident. The facade of normalcy wouldn't last much longer. Faced with the question, Zhang He remained silent. She seemed to be processing the simple offer of food in a world that, to her, made absolutely no sense, until the word hunger finally registered. It was a basic need, the first thing she truly understood since arriving in that strange place. Her stomach responded before she could speak. The sound broke the silence, comically and undeniably confirming that the warrior from another era was, indeed, starving. Suddenly, an idea sparked in Xu Qing's mind. He asked her to wait a moment, prompted by a sudden thought about how to get money. The sudden approach startled Zhang He, who didn't understand the young man's change in demeanor. The situation grew stranger for her with each passing second. Carefully, he took her hand. Xu Qing had a hunch that the solution to their financial problem might lie with the girl herself. And his hunch was right. In her palm, there were 2 small silver pieces. It wasn't much, but perhaps it was enough to start. A mischievous smile appeared on Xu Qing's face. He saw an opportunity there, a way to get money to buy what they needed at that moment. Zhang He didn't understand the logic of this world, but in a gesture of goodwill, she offered him a small object she carried, as if it were a trade. The communication barrier was frustrating. Exhausted, Xu Qing refused her offer, trying to explain that he couldn't just take her belongings. Looking at her loose, unsuitable clothes, he finally understood the scope of the problem. Xu Qing promised he'd go out to buy clothes, food, and whatever else she needed. Alone in the bathroom, It finally dawned on him. Looking in the mirror, Xu Qing realized the sheer madness of having a girl from another era in his home. He tried to push away the absurd thoughts and focus on his routine, as if normalcy could somehow erase the strangeness of recent events. Every gesture was an attempt to anchor himself in reality. He splashed water on his face, hoping the shock would help him think more clearly about what to do. But there was no escaping it. Reality was what it was, no matter how insane it seemed. With his face still wet, a new determination emerged. He had to deal with this. Xu Qing's determination quickly gave way to the harsh reality of the task. Buying clothes for a girl from another era was a challenge, and he had no idea where to begin. To avoid embarrassment, he simply pointed at the first items he saw, asking for one of each, hoping to get it over with as quickly as possible. He rummaged through the racks, trying to find something that seemed even remotely suitable for her situation, feeling utterly lost. Amidst the confusion, a simpler dress caught his eye, and he decided to take it too, adding another item to his impulsive purchase. With the clothes in hand, he continued walking through the store, feeling increasingly out of place and eager to leave. It was then that he turned down an aisle and came face to face with the lingerie section. The sight made him freeze in place. Shock and embarrassment washed over Xu Qing. This was a level of intimacy he was definitely not prepared for. An hour later, completely drained by the experience, he finally left the store, carrying the bags and a sigh of relief. But his peace was short-lived. A familiar voice called out to him, asking if he'd been shopping. It was his neighbor. Xu Qing tried to hide his nervousness, awkwardly holding the bags as he turned to greet her. She mentioned a call from the day before, and he, caught off guard, made up an excuse, saying he'd accidentally dialed the wrong number. The neighbor, oblivious to his discomfort, began warning him about a thief in the neighborhood, advising him to be careful and keep everything locked. Xu Qing simply agreed, saying he'd remember the warning. He just wanted to end the conversation and get on his way as quickly as possible. Later, at the library, he still felt spaced out. The strangeness of his current life made it hard to focus on normal tasks, like picking up a book. With everything settled, there was nowhere left to run. He looked at the building in front of him and decided it was time to go back. As he passed, he greeted the security guard. The man, however, seemed to have something serious to say, returning the greeting with a worried look. The guard offered some friendly advice, likely about the recent security warnings in the neighborhood, and Xu Qing listened attentively. The guard's words made him tense. The idea of a thief nearby, combined with Zhang He's presence in his apartment, was a dangerous combination. He opened the door with the utmost care, unsure of what he would find on the other side. And there she was. Zhang He waited for him in a combat stance, weapon in hand, ready for any threat that dared to enter. Seeing it was him, she finally relaxed. The girl said the place was safe and that he was acting strangely, inviting him to eat. Xu Qing thanked her, relieved, and handed over the bag with the purchases he had made for her. It was then that he had an idea. A little provocation to break the ice of that surreal situation. He dramatically suggested that she should thank him as if he were a great hero, a young warrior who had saved her. Jiang, who was completely lost by his act. That way of showing gratitude made no sense to her at all. She simply thanked him in a straightforward manner, not understanding the joke, which left the young man a bit embarrassed. But Xu Qing decided to see the prank through, striking a formal pose as if he were receiving a great honor. Her reaction was pure boredom and confusion. The young man's attempt at humor had failed miserably. To break the awkward silence, he opened the lunchbox he'd brought. Perhaps food was a language they could both finally understand. Food was the universal language he'd hoped for. Zhang He, who until then seemed like a warrior from another era, devoured the meal with impressive speed, leaving the young protagonist completely shocked. For her, each bite was a discovery. Modern world food was something she had never tasted, and the girl didn't waste a second savoring every flavor. Seeing her reaction, the young man finally relaxed and started eating too. The previous awkward silence was replaced by a moment of peace and a shared meal. After the meal, he showed her the clothes he'd bought. The young man explained he didn't know her exact size but chose based on her height, hoping they would fit. He showed her a dress and a pair of sneakers, saying they would be much more comfortable than the straw sandals she wore. It was a gift to help her adapt. He continued explaining about the clothes he'd bought, trying to be as helpful as possible. However, among the purchases, there was an item he wasn't sure how to explain. When Jong-ho pulled the underwear out of the bag, the young man froze completely, mortified. The atmosphere instantly turned awkward. Neither of them knew how to react to the situation, and embarrassment filled the air. While the young man squirmed in embarrassment, Jong-ho, not understanding his reaction, simply put another item back in the bag, trying to break the ice. Her confusion was genuine. The girl couldn't understand why a simple piece of clothing would cause such an exaggerated reaction. To change the subject, he handed her 2 books. One was about history, so she could better understand the current world, and the other was to help her with the language. Realizing the books might not be enough, he had another idea. Teach Jong-ho how to use a computer. It would be the fastest way for her to learn about the modern world. But, looking back, he realized the girl was exhausted. The day had been long and full of emotions for her. He commented that she seemed not to have slept well and suggested she rest. Then, he asked if she had any questions about the previous night, about how she got there. His question caught her by surprise. There was indeed something she wanted to know, the most important question of all. How could she return home? The young protagonist was speechless. Her question was simple, but the answer was impossible. He tried to imagine where she might have come from, but could only think about how difficult it would be for her to go back. He interrupted her, needing a moment to process everything. Jang-ho's mind, on the other hand, seemed focused on something else, perhaps on someone she knew, a wealthy figure from her time. To find answers, she picked up the history book he had given her. The girl began to flip through the pages, desperately searching for any image or text that resembled the world she knew. But the more she looked, the more sadness took over. Nothing there was familiar. The harsh reality that her time had passed began to weigh on her. Seeing her sadness, the young man felt bad. He needed to do something to cheer her up, to take her mind off that impossible situation. He remembered the story she told, how she got lost in the forest during a storm, chasing a thief until she accidentally found his house. And that's when a crazy idea popped into his mind. A way to test something, to better understand who she really was. He turned to her, excited about his plan. He wanted to know more about her abilities, about what she was capable of doing. Jong-he didn't understand the sudden change in mood. She just watched him with curiosity. Then, he asked the most unexpected question of all. What was the highest she could jump without getting hurt? Instead of answering with words, she simply started walking towards the window to show him. With all the naturalness in the world, she pointed upwards and said that most likely, jumping from there would be fine. The young man's jaw dropped when he realized where she was pointing. It wasn't the apartment window, it was the 4th floor. At that moment, he was certain. The girl he sheltered wasn't normal at all.